The professor held up Malik's paper in front of the packed lecture hall, then tore it in half, smirking. "This isn't your world, Malik." The room burst into cruel laughter as he added, "Real science has rules, and you're not in it." But what no one saw coming, Malik's formula had already cracked a problem the department called unsolvable, and someone powerful was watching from the back row. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The lecture hall inside the historic Jefferson Science Building at Wexley University smelled faintly of chalk and prestige. It was a room built for men who were born to be believed. The walls carried the scent of legacy. The portraits of long-dead physicists looking down like silent sentinels of inherited brilliance. 87 students filled the curved wooden benches, scribbling notes, tapping laptops, murmuring to each other between equations and ego. But it was a single moment, a sound, that unmistakable clap of a book slamming shut, that cut through everything. "This isn't your world, Malik," Professor Wendell barked. The sarcasm curled around his words like barbed wire. Malik's notebook had been open on the desk, scribbled with messy equations, scrawls of ideas not yet polished into academic language. But it wasn't chaos. There was something alive in it, a different rhythm, a foreign elegance, something Malik saw not as an error, but as an answer. Wendell, in his perfectly tailored blazer and half-moon glasses, snatched it up like it was garbage and slapped it closed with a condescending thud. The room fell silent. No one laughed out loud. Not at first, but a ripple of smirks spread like a contagion. A chuckle here, a whisper there. Some students shook their heads as if to say, "Why would he even try that here?" Others just watched, waiting to see how Malik would react. But Malik didn't flinch. His eyes locked with Wendell's, not with defiance but with a stunned kind of ache. There was something about the way Wendell had said it, not just the words but the way he used them like a weapon. As if Malik's presence alone violated the laws of academic gravity. Wendell turned back to the board, casually tossing Malik's notebook onto the edge of the desk where it nearly slid off. "If you want to invent sci-fi, I hear the English department's offering a creative writing course next semester," he added, drawing laughter now, full-bodied and safe. Malik slowly picked up his notebook. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence made the insult louder. He scanned the chalkboard, saw the familiar Dirac equation Wendell was dissecting for the class, and the tiny mistake, a minus sign where there should have been a plus. A small thing, a nothing thing to most eyes. But in quantum theory, one sign changed everything. He wanted to speak, to correct it. But he knew better. He had already learned what correction meant coming from someone like him, in a room like this. It wasn't education, it was insubordination. Class ended 27 minutes later. As students gathered their things, Malik sat still, replaying the moment. His throat felt tight, not from embarrassment, but from rage trapped in a place too deep to name. He had worked on that formula for 4 months. It wasn't a mistake. It was an expansion, a rethinking, a door no one else had opened, because no one else had bothered to look where he had. As he walked out of the hall, his friend Ezra caught up with him, his expression part apologetic, part terrified. "Man, that was harsh. I mean, he didn't have to say it like that." Malik didn't answer. His voice would have cracked. His face was blank. But inside there was movement, pressure, thought. He walked to his dorm, each step carving something into the stone of his patience. Injustice wasn't new. Racism wasn't foreign. But this wasn't a cop or a slur or a broken system. This was a door slammed shut by the people who claimed they loved truth. That night, Malik spread his notes out again, on the floor of his dorm. Formulae covered every inch of paper. He scanned the messy web he had created, and began refining it. He wasn't just going to prove it. He was going to burn it into the bones of science. He would make it undeniable. Malik's roommate Shane peeked in. "You're really not gonna let that slide, huh?" Malik gave a small, sharp shake of his head. He said, "This isn't my world." That's his mistake. For the next 2 weeks, Malik barely slept. He moved between the library's physics archive and his room, building his theory like an architect laying foundations in a storm. He rewrote the core assumptions of energy fluctuation in constrained dimensions, touched on possibilities of non-local interaction, refined a set of equations that hinted at what he called quantum harmony, a rebalancing framework where interference became a resource, not a problem. But he didn't tell anyone, not Ezra, not Shane, not the student groups he used to meet with. He knew what they would say: "Be careful, Don't make yourself a target. Don't give them a reason to bury you deeper. Instead, he submitted it anonymously. He converted the work into a clean technical paper. He stripped out any reference to himself, formatted it in LaTeX, ran a quiet test through a campus network with a dummy email. Then he sent it to the department's internal forum, where professors and doctoral students shared emerging ideas and asked for peer input. He called it a harmonic framework for subspace quantum tunneling. Within 48 hours, the paper was being circulated among faculty like contraband. In a faculty lounge lined with books and arrogance, Professor Wendell held a printed copy in his hands. He read through it in silence, then read it again. His eyes narrowed, his fingers clenched slightly. It was mathematically perfect, not speculative, groundbreaking. Dr. Mavis, a senior researcher and tenured quantum field specialist, leaned over Wendell's shoulder. "Whose work is this?" "No name on the submission," Wendell muttered, his voice tightening. "Could be a hoax." Mavis raised an eyebrow. "Or it could be the start of something that leaves your textbook outdated by next semester." Wendell said nothing, but inside, a war had begun. He knew the structure. He recognized fragments of the idea. He remembered something vaguely from the notebook he had ridiculed. The lines, the curvature of the equations. His chest tightened. He felt the edges of control slip. Back in his dorm, Malik watched the discussion unfold from a proxy server. The faculty were obsessed. They were praising the math, asking for more, offering to mentor the anonymous author. The same minds that dismissed him now offered their names like business cards to someone they thought looked like them. He didn't smile. He saved every comment. He waited. And then he made his move. Malik uploaded a second file to the forum, an addendum, with deeper proofs and corrections to a flaw Wendell had pointed out in a past lecture. The new document was timestamped, tracked to the same IP. This time he included a name. Just one line. Author Malik Langston. Within 6 minutes, the forum exploded. One professor removed his previous comment of support. Another edited his reply to question the paper's originality. A third began circulating rumors of possible AI involvement. Malik watched the backpedaling in real time. The way excellence from a black student became suspicious the moment it had a face. But he wasn't scared. He was just getting started. Because buried deep within Malik's original notes, the ones the professor had slammed shut, was a quantum theorem that not only redefined tunneling theory, but accidentally predicted a pattern in particle resonance no one had ever seen, until it began appearing in real experiments across Europe. Weeks later, the email arrived at 3:17 a.m., slipping quietly into inboxes that usually only held conference reminders and grant rejections. It carried no subject line, no greeting, no signature, just a single attached document and a short sentence in plain text that felt almost deliberate in its restraint. A new framework. Peer review welcome. By morning, the physics department at Wexley University was no longer running on caffeine and routine. It was running on confusion. Faculty members opened the document, expecting sloppiness, maybe an overconfident graduate student trying to sound smarter than they were. What they found instead was something far more unsettling. The equations were elegant, clean, aggressive in their logic. The assumptions were unconventional but airtight, as if the author had walked around decades of accepted theory instead of through it. The math did not ask for permission. It asserted itself. Professor Wendell read it standing up in his office, his coat still on, briefcase untouched by the door. Halfway through the second page, he stopped breathing without realizing it. He flipped back, reread, moved forward again. His fingers tapped against the margin, not in excitement, but in irritation, the kind that came from recognizing something too late. Across the building, Dr. Mavis forwarded the paper to 3 colleagues with a single line. "This is either nonsense or history." Within hours, the internal faculty forum began to pulse. Replies stacked on top of replies, cautious at first, then increasingly animated. Someone pointed out how the framework addressed long-standing inconsistencies in quantum tunneling. Another highlighted the way the harmonic variables could be tested experimentally with existing equipment. A postdoctoral fellow admitted, anonymously, that they had tried to disprove the model for 2 hours and failed. Still no name. That absence mattered more than the brilliance. Speculation filled the gaps. Some assumed it came from a visiting scholar, maybe someone protecting unpublished work. Others suspected an international researcher, avoiding intellectual theft. No one suggested it could be an undergraduate. That possibility never entered the room. It didn't need to be spoken to be dismissed. By noon, Professor Wendell convened an informal gathering in the faculty lounge. It wasn't labeled a meeting, but everyone understood the urgency. Printed copies of the paper lay scattered across the long oak table, like evidence from a crime scene. This framework contradicts three foundational assumptions, Wendell said, his voice controlled but sharp. Which means either the author is reckless, or we've been wrong longer than we care to admit. Dr. Mavis leaned back in her chair. Or the author sees something we don't. A few professors shifted uncomfortably. That sentence landed too close to ego. The anonymity is concerning, another faculty member added. Credible research doesn't hide. Wendell's jaw tightened. He thought of the notebook, the handwriting, the curved arrows in the margins. The idea brushed his mind like a mosquito. He refused to acknowledge. He dismissed it instantly. This needs to be vetted, he said, carefully. By evening, the department chair requested server logs to trace the submission. Officially, it was about security. Unofficially, it was about control. Malik watched all of it from his dorm room, the glow of his laptop reflecting off walls cluttered with half-erased equations. He had expected excitement. He had expected skepticism. What he hadn't expected was the speed with which curiosity hardened into ownership. The language in the forum shifted subtly. From the author suggests to this could be developed further under proper supervision. The work was already being mentally claimed. When the IT department flagged the submission's origin as coming from a student network, the tone changed instantly. Questions sharpened. Praise softened. The word review began appearing next to words like verification and authenticity. Wendell received the update just after dinner. He read the message twice, then closed his laptop slowly. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened screen. Composed, respected, unchallenged. The idea that the paper could have come from one of his own students irritated him more than it should have. He opened the forum again and typed a response, deleting and rewriting it several times before posting. Before we celebrate, we should confirm the origin and originality of this work. Anonymous submissions are vulnerable to misinterpretation and misuse. The comment landed like permission. Within minutes, others echoed it. Someone suggested running the equations through plagiarism software. Another proposed evaluating whether advanced language models could have generated similar structures. The shift was subtle, but Malik felt it like a temperature drop. He leaned back in his chair, hands clasped behind his head. He had known this part would come. He just hadn't known how quickly brilliance would turn into suspicion once it stopped feeling abstract. The next morning, Malik attended class like nothing had changed. Wendell lectured as usual, confident, precise, never once acknowledging the storm he was helping stir. Malik noticed, though, the way Wendell avoided looking at him, the way his chalk paused for half a second too long before touching the board. After class, Malik passed a group of graduate students, whispering near the exit. He caught fragments. Student network. Probably hacked. No way it's real. That night, an official email landed in Malik's inbox. We would like to discuss your recent activity on the department forum. Please attend a review meeting tomorrow at 10. No accusation. No explanation. Just an invitation wrapped in authority. The meeting room was small and windowless. Wendell sat at the head of the table, flanked by two faculty members Malik barely knew. A laptop sat open in front of them. Malik's paper displayed on the screen like a suspect lineup. You submitted this work anonymously. Wendell began, not looking at Malik. Why? Malik kept his voice steady. He said it was to avoid bias. He said he wanted the math evaluated on its merit. One of the professors nodded, but Wendell's expression didn't change. And now you want credit. I want accuracy, Malik said. Wendell finally looked at him. There was no anger there, just dismissal. This level of work typically reflects years of guided research, Wendell said. Not independent undergraduate exploration. Malik felt a familiar tightening in his chest. The unspoken translation hovered between them. People like you don't produce work like this alone. I did, Malik said. Silence followed. Not the thoughtful kind. The skeptical kind. We'll need to investigate, Wendell said. Verify sources. Process. Authorship. Malik nodded. He had expected that too. What he hadn't expected was the follow-up. Until then, Wendell added, we advise you not to discuss this work publicly. It wasn't advice. It was containment. As Malik left the room, his phone vibrated. A notification from the forum. Someone had replied to the original post. A senior researcher from Europe. If the author is willing, I'd like to test this framework against recent anomalous data from our lab. This could explain patterns we've been unable to model. Malik stopped walking. He stared at the message, heart pounding. because that data wasn't public, which meant the theory wasn't just interesting. It was already true. And just as Malik realized his work was being quietly validated overseas, the university initiated a formal academic integrity review, one that had ended black students' careers before it ever reached the truth. The moment Malik's name became officially attached to the paper, the air around him changed in ways that couldn't be logged or documented, but could be felt everywhere. Hallways grew quieter when he entered them. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Eyes followed him with a new calculation, not curiosity but suspicion, as if brilliance had become a crime once it wore his face. What had been anonymous genius was now framed as an anomaly that demanded explanation, correction, or erasure. The department's response was swift and coldly procedural. An academic integrity review was announced under the language of neutrality. But Malik understood the translation immediately. This was not about truth. It was about disbelief. The same faculty members who had praised the work's elegance days earlier now spoke about it as a problem to be solved, an inconsistency in the social order of intellect. Their emails were careful, rehearsed, filled with phrases like due diligence and institutional responsibility, but none of them said what hovered between every line. He couldn't have written this. Professor Wendell never said Malik's name out loud in public during that week. He didn't have to. His presence alone carried authority, and his silence framed Malik more effectively than accusation. In closed-door meetings, however, Wendell's tone hardened. He questioned the methodology, the originality, the timing. He asked why a student with Malik's background had never produced work of this caliber before, ignoring the fact that Malik had never been given the platform to do so. Each question was delivered politely, professionally, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. The review committee summoned Malik again, this time with a larger panel. The room was brighter, the table longer, the atmosphere heavier. Malik sat alone on one side while 5 faculty members occupied the other, their laptops open, his work projected behind them like a silent witness. They asked him to explain his thinking from first principles, as if mastery could only be proven by repetition under pressure. Malik answered calmly, walking them through assumptions, corrections, implications. He noticed how they nodded at the math but flinched at his confidence, as though certainty itself was suspicious coming from him. One professor asked whether Malik had collaborated with anyone off campus. Another asked if he had access to private datasets. A third raised the possibility of artificial intelligence assistance, framing it as a neutral inquiry while already typing notes. Malik felt the questioning shift from understanding to containment. They weren't trying to learn how he had done it. They were trying to find a way he hadn't. Outside the room, the rumor mill worked faster than any formal process. Students whispered that Malik had cheated, that he'd hacked the forum, that someone had helped him and he was taking credit. The irony burned quietly, that Malik, who had spent nights alone teaching himself theory from borrowed books and open-access journals, was now accused of stealing intelligence itself. He overheard someone in the cafeteria say that the paper was too clean to be authentic. Another joked that Malik must have copied it from Europe. Laughter followed. Malik kept walking. Ezra tried to stand by him, but even that came with hesitation. Support now carried social risk. Being seen with Malik meant being associated with controversy, with discomfort. Shane noticed it too. The way people knocked less. The way Malik's name stopped appearing in group chats. Isolation wasn't enforced. It was encouraged. The department sent Malik a formal notice outlining potential consequences if misconduct were proven. The language was devastating in its calmness. Suspension, expulsion, revocation of credits. Each word landed with institutional finality. Malik read the email twice, then once more slowly, not because he didn't understand it, but because he needed to confirm it was real, that this was how quickly admiration had transformed into threat. What hurt most was not the fear of punishment. It was the erasure embedded in the doubt. The assumption that Malik's mind required an external explanation. That genius, when it looked like him, had to be borrowed, stolen, or artificial. The university didn't say it directly, but the message echoed everywhere. Excellence belongs to us. If you display it, prove you didn't take it. Late one night, Malik received a message from the European researcher, who had commented on the forum. The tone was cautious but intrigued. They had run preliminary tests against archive data, and the harmonic framework aligned disturbingly well. There was excitement there, genuine scientific excitement, but also confusion about the controversy. Malik didn't reply immediately. Every communication now felt like potential evidence. Every interaction another thing that could be twisted. The review intensified. Malik was asked to submit drafts, timestamps, notes. He complied, handing over years of intellectual labor without hesitation. Still, the questions didn't stop. Instead, they narrowed, focused. The committee fixated on one idea: improbability. Not impossibility, just improbability. That a student like Malik could arrive at something like this alone. Professor Wendell requested a private conversation. It took place in Wendell's office, the same room where framed awards lined the walls and the air smelled faintly of leather and authority. Wendell gestured for Malik to sit, then closed the door himself. The room felt smaller than before. "I want to be clear," Wendell said, folding his hands. "This process doesn't have to end badly." Malik listened. "There's no shame," Wendell continued, "in acknowledging assistance. Research is collaborative by nature." "I didn't collaborate," Malik said evenly. Wendell sighed, as if disappointed by stubbornness rather than dishonesty. "Malik, understand something. Institutions like this move slowly, but they move decisively. If this review escalates, it will follow you. Graduate schools, fellowships, journals, they all watch." Malik felt the weight of it settle in his chest. This wasn't mentorship. It was leverage. Wendell leaned back. "There are ways to resolve this quietly." The word quietly echoed. He explained the deal, without calling it one. If Malik amended the authorship, if he acknowledged guidance from a senior faculty member, a name Wendell did not specify, but clearly implied, the review could be softened, reframed. Malik's record would remain intact, his future preserved. The work could still be published, just properly contextualized, properly controlled. Malik understood the cost immediately. He would be allowed to stay, but not to stand, to exist within the system, but not to disrupt it. His brilliance would survive only if it was diluted, rebranded, laundered through someone more acceptable. "And if I don't?" Malik asked. Wendell's voice lowered. "Then the committee continues. And committees rarely admit they were wrong." Malik looked around the office, at the walls heavy with borrowed history. He thought of the notebook slammed shut, of the whispers, of the way belief evaporated the moment it saw him clearly. He stood. "I wrote it," Malik said. "All of it." Wendell didn't respond right away. His expression didn't harden. It softened, almost regretful. "That's unfortunate," he said. Malik walked out, knowing something irreversible had just happened. Because within hours of rejecting the deal, Malik would receive a second offer. This one undocumented, off the record, and far more dangerous, asking him not just to share credit, but to surrender the truth entirely. Malik didn't plan to become someone who recorded rooms. The decision didn't come from paranoia or rebellion. It came from pattern recognition. Every conversation with faculty followed the same structure now. Polite questions wrapped around invisible traps. Encouragement that always bent toward ownership. Concern that quietly erased his agency. Words mattered, but tone mattered more. And tone, Malik understood, never made it into official minutes. The recorder was small, no bigger than a thumb drive. He bought it with cash from a corner electronics store off campus, the kind of place that didn't ask questions and didn't care why a student needed something designed to listen quietly. He tested it in his dorm, letting it run while he solved equations aloud, making sure the audio caught breath. Pauses, hesitation. He wasn't trying to trap anyone. He was trying to protect himself from being rewritten. The next faculty meeting took place in a shared lab space. Glass walls, long steel tables. Equipment humming softly in the background, like a reminder of purpose. Malik slipped the recorder into the front pocket of his backpack and placed it beside his chair, zipper half open. His hands were steady, but his chest wasn't. This was new territory. Not the math. The vigilant. Professor Wendell arrived late, as usual, commanding the room without raising his voice. Two other faculty members joined, along with a senior postdoctoral researcher Malik had worked with briefly before the review began. The conversation started predictably. Questions about Malik's process, suggestions about refining language, comments about how the department wanted to help. But slowly, subtly, the language shifted. One professor mentioned how the framework could be positioned more effectively if guided by someone with established credibility. Another spoke about protecting the university's reputation, how controversial discoveries needed careful stewardship. Malik said little, listening more than responding, letting the recorder do what it was built for. Then Wendell said something that made Malik's stomach tighten. "This work," Wendell said, "is too important to be destabilized by authorship confusion." The phrase landed heavy, Authorship confusion. As if Malik's name itself was the confusion. Another voice followed. Quieter, more clinical. If this had emerged from a senior lab, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Wendell didn't disagree. They talked about assigning oversight. About reframing contribution. About how ideas could be nurtured without centering the individual who sparked them. Malik heard his work being slowly disassembled and reassembled into something he no longer recognized. Something that kept the discovery but discarded the discoverer. When the meeting ended, Malik walked out into the hallway with his pulse racing. The recorder still warm in his bag. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt exposed. Like someone who had just witnessed the blueprint of their own erasure. The recordings continued over the next week. Smaller meetings, casual conversations, offhand remarks that revealed more than intended. Malik learned how easily professionalism masked prejudice. How phrases like "not the right fit" and "lacking maturity" were deployed to explain away discomfort with his presence. He captured Wendell Oak, quietly, confidently, about how history remembered institutions, not students. "These things get absorbed," Wendell said once, unaware he was being recorded. "Names fade. Frameworks remain." Malik listened to that clip alone in his dorm, replaying it until the words lost their sting and became something colder. Strategy. But Malik wasn't alone in the lab. Jordan Keene had been one of the first people to welcome Malik when he joined the research group. White, affable, ambitious, Jordan had a way of making himself indispensable. Running simulations, managing data, staying. He spoke the language of allyship fluently, often criticizing the department's lack of diversity in conversations that felt sincere. Malik trusted him, not blindly, but enough. Jordan noticed the recorder by accident. It was during a late-night session, the lab mostly empty, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Malik had stepped out to grab coffee, leaving his backpack under the table. Jordan's foot caught the strap, tipping it just enough for the recorder to slide out onto the floor. When Malik returned, Jordan was holding it. "What's this?" he asked lightly. The question was casual, the moment was not. Malik froze. There were 100 ways to answer, none of them safe. He chose honesty, or something close to it. He said he was documenting meetings, that things were being said off the record, that he needed to protect himself. He didn't accuse. He didn't dramatize. He explained. Jordan listened, nodding slowly, eyes unreadable. "That makes sense," Jordan said. Given everything, relief washed through Malik, thin but real. What Malik didn't see was the calculation happening behind Jordan's expression. The opportunity. The leverage. The way proximity to Malik's storm could be converted into shelter from it. Jordan didn't tell Malik he was uncomfortable. He didn't warn him about policy. He didn't advise caution. Instead, he offered help. Said he could organize files, keep backups, make sure nothing was lost. Malik agreed. The betrayal didn't happen loudly. It didn't look like malice. It looked like concern forwarded to the wrong person. Jordan sent a message to someone Malik had never met, a compliance officer with ties to the department, known for cleaning up issues before they became public. He didn't include context. He didn't include the full recording. He sent snippets, carefully selected, pieces that removed the pressure, the manipulation, the intent, and left only Malik's voice, questioning, pushing, sounding out of context, confrontational. By the time Malik realized something was wrong, it was too late. The university sent a notice claiming awareness of unauthorized recordings and potential misconduct. Malik's inbox filled with language colder than anything before. The tone had shifted again, this time from suspicion to accusation. They called it a violation of trust. They called it unethical. They did not call it self-defense. The recordings, or what remained of them, appeared before Malik ever saw the official charge. A faculty member confronted him in the hallway, voice low and sharp, asking how long he had been planning to entrap people. Another suggested he was manipulating narratives to distract from flaws in his work. Malik demanded to hear the evidence. When he finally did, his hands trembled. The audio had been edited, pauses removed, context stripped. Faculty statements clipped to sound neutral, reasonable. Malik's responses isolated, framed as aggressive, accusatory. The truth wasn't erased. It was rearranged. In this version, Malik wasn't protecting himself. He was plotting. He looked at the waveform on the screen, recognized his own voice, and felt something break quietly inside his chest. Not because he'd been outsmarted, but because he had trusted someone who smiled while doing it. Jordan didn't answer Malik's calls, didn't respond to texts, By the end of the day, the narrative was set. Malik Langston, the student under review, had secretly recorded faculty and attempted to manipulate evidence to shield himself from an integrity investigation. The university moved fast. They always did when the threat wasn't their conscience, but their image. And within hours, the edited audio would leak beyond the university, not as proof of racism, but as supposed evidence that Malik's groundbreaking formula was never his at all. It started with a single headline on a student-run news blog, posted just past midnight. Wexley student caught secretly recording faculty to avoid plagiarism inquiry. The article cited anonymous sources, unnamed faculty, and a leaked audio clip that painted Malik as calculated, deceptive, someone gaming the system, not exposing it. It didn't take long for larger media to pick it up. By sunrise, the name Malik Langston was trending for all the wrong reason. The protests began that afternoon. It wasn't organized. Not at first. Just clusters of students standing outside the administration building. Some holding signs, others blasting the full-length version of Malik's real audio files. The unedited ones he released on his own page to fight the narrative. Voices trembled through speakers. Wendell joking about authorship. Faculty questioning Malik's legitimacy. Plans to redistribute credit under the guise of guidance. The truth was there. Raw. Unearned. Unfiltered. But truth rarely spreads as fast as scandal. By the next day, the university had issued a public statement that said a review was ongoing. That all parties were being heard. That Wexley remained committed to integrity and inclusion. The language was vague. Sterilized. It didn't name Malik. It didn't acknowledge the leak, but it signaled to the press exactly where the university stood, at a distance. Major outlets picked it up. The framing shifted. What started as an anonymous paper praised for its brilliance was now a controversial submission under review for ethical violations. The headlines were subtle but effective. Questions surround breakthrough research linked to Wexley student. Debate over race, credit, and academic conduct. Rising star or manipulator. Inside the Malik Langston story, the campus became a battleground of perspectives. Some students, especially those from the physics and engineering departments, distanced themselves. They said Malik had created unnecessary drama, that he should have stayed quiet and let the process work, that his going public was performative. Others, particularly black students, refused to let the story be rewritten without resistance. They filled the quad with signs that read "Brilliance nays whiteness," and "Malik deserves credit, not censorship." They marched across campus in silent protest, arms raised, wearing tape over their mouths with Malik scrawled across it in thick black ink. They occupied the steps of the science building where the faculty offices were, reading his paper aloud over megaphones, paragraph by paragraph. The administration began issuing warnings. First came the emails, then the student conduct referrals, then the threats of disciplinary action for unauthorized disruption of academic activity. Malik watched it unfold with a sense of detached disbelief. His name had become a cause, but one twisted in so many directions, he didn't recognize it anymore. Black student organizations tried to meet with the university president. They were met instead by the vice provost for student affairs, who said the matter was sensitive, that the university could not appear biased while an internal investigation was ongoing. Behind closed doors, student leaders were told to stop mobilizing or risk funding cuts and event cancellations. Malik sat in the back of a town hall meeting, where faculty claimed they wanted transparency and fairness, but refused to address what had been said in the recordings. When one student asked why no professor had been placed under review despite clear evidence of collusion and bias, the moderator cut the microphone. The emotional toll on Malik deepened. He couldn't walk across campus without overhearing his name, often in the mouths of people who'd never spoken to him before, debating whether he was a genius or a fraud, a symbol or a warning. He stopped going to the dining hall, avoided study lounges. He spent most of his time in the math department's sub-basement, where few students ventured, scribbling theories on glass boards not because he had to, but because it was the only place his thoughts still belonged to him. The formula, the one that started everything, had evolved. Malik kept refining it, adding new variables, making the structure even more efficient. He planned to present it at the upcoming International Student Physics Conference in Chicago, one of the few places left where the merit of the math might speak louder than the rumors that wrapped around his name. It was a lifeline, a chance to reclaim the story. The invitation had arrived a month earlier, before the scandal broke. He had been selected to open the conference's Student Innovation Session, a rare honor that only one undergrad per year received. The committee had loved his paper. They'd called it disruptive in the best way. They hadn't known about Wexley's scandal. Not yet. Malik had spent the last 3 nights preparing his slides, editing them until they were seamless. No extra fluff, no theoretical hedging, just clean, elegant math that no one could deny. He told himself it wouldn't matter what they thought of him personally once the formula was in front of them. But Wexley wasn't done with him. 3 hours before he was supposed to board the train to Chicago, Malik received a formal letter via email, signed, stamped, and flagged urgent. Subject: notice of immediate academic expulsion. The email was cold. 12 sentences. They cited violation of institutional trust, unauthorized surveillance of faculty, and conduct inconsistent with university values. It stated that, effective immediately, Malik Langston was no longer enrolled at Wexley University. His access to campus resources had been revoked. His conference travel, partially funded by a university grant, had been canceled. There was no hearing, no prior warning, no appeal process outlined. It wasn't punishment, it was obliteration. Malik stared at the screen, blinking once, twice. For a moment, the room didn't feel real. He looked around at the whiteboard filled with numbers, the open suitcase on his bed, the stack of printed slides beside it. Everything he had built, his reputation, his work, his defense, wiped out with a single administrative gesture. Shane burst into the room moments later, breathless. "I just saw it," he said. "This is insane. You didn't even get to—" Malik raised a hand to stop him. Not out of anger, just quiet. Control. "They're not scared I cheated," Malik said. "They're scared I did it alone." He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat down at his desk, the conference badge still unopened beside him. The formula was saved to 3 different drives. One was already encrypted and sent to the conference committee, but that didn't change what the university had done. He wasn't just erased, he was discredited. They had turned his defense into his downfall. Across campus, students protested again, louder this time. But the media coverage didn't change. Now the headlines read, "Wexley student expelled amid growing academic scandal, conference appearance cancelled." The nuance was gone, the edit was complete. And as Malik stared at the letter, his phone vibrated, an unknown number, international code. When he picked up, a heavily accented voice spoke carefully. "Mr. Langston, we believe your formula is already being used in our lab, without your name on it." Malik didn't pack. He didn't check the train schedule. He didn't ask permission. He just left. 40 minutes after the call from Geneva, he was on the move, laptop in one hand, the other still shaking from the weight of what he'd just heard. A lab overseas, using his formula, without his name. It wasn't just theory anymore. It was theft. He boarded a bus to New York City with nothing but a black backpack and his research drive strapped to his chest like body armor. The seat beside him stayed empty the entire trip, though the bus was full. He sat stiff and silent, watching the world rush by through a fogged-up window, equations quietly dancing behind his eyes like ghosts, refusing to rest. There was no time to process what had happened, no time to grieve what had been taken, only motion forward, fast, determined. The International Physics Summit was being held at the Intercontinental Midtown, a towering glass cathedral of prestige, polished suits, and security checkpoints. It looked like a place built to keep people like Malik out. He stood across the street for 5 full minutes, watching as scholars, experts, and invited students flowed through the revolving doors, conference badges swinging from their necks, like keys to a world he'd been locked out of. He had no badge, no invitation, no institution behind him, just a formula and a name already tarnished. He waited until a group of hotel staff wheeled a cart through a side door, then slipped in behind them unnoticed. Invisibility, after all, was a skill he had mastered. Inside, he followed signage to the breakout rooms, the smaller stages where less mainstream topics were debated. His eyes scanned the printed session schedule, knowing he wasn't on it. But at 3:10 p.m., he found his opportunity. A talk by Dr. Eric Costas had been cancelled last minute, the word TBD scribbled in red ink across the slot. It wasn't a stage, it was a crack in the wall. And that was all Malik needed. Hovering near the organizer table, Malik waited. He heard the tension in their voices, concern over gaps in the program, reputational risk, time constraints. He stepped forward and spoke with calm defiance. "I have something worth presenting." Their eyes scanned him. The hoodie, the skin, the youth. "And you are?" one asked. "Malik Langston." The name landed like a thud. One of the organizers blinked. "The kid from Wexley?" Malik didn't respond. He didn't need to. Another staff member leaned in. We can't just. I only need 10 minutes, Malik said. You don't have to vouch for me. Just let me speak. They pulled aside to whisper in tense tones. Finally, the older one relented. If you cause a scene, we shut it down. Understood. The room was half full. Scientists, grad students, reporters and a few senior attendees, whose conference badges shimmered with VIP tags. When Malik stepped onto the small stage, several heads tilted, puzzled. No suit, no title slide with degrees. Just a name and a hoodie. He plugged in his laptop and projected the presentation, a harmonic framework for subspace quantum tunneling, a disruption in predictive resonance. Whispers began immediately. Someone muttered, "Isn't that the kid who?" Another scoffed. "What's this? TikTok physics." Malik ignored them all. He began to speak. Not with fear, not even with anger, but with focus so sharp it could slice glass. He walked them through the equation's foundations, how conventional theories treated wave interference as destructive noise, and how his framework flipped that logic, turning interference into structure. He spoke of harmony inside chaos, resonance inside disorder. With every word, the noise in the room faded. Heads turned. Laptops were closed. Pens stopped moving. Then he moved to the board. He didn't just talk. Equation after equation. Step by step. Clean logic. No jargon walls. No defensive tone. Just pure thought, layered like architecture. Each mark brought murmurs, but they weren't dismissive anymore. They were awe. In the back row, a hand moved slowly. A man pulled out his phone and began recording, quietly, steadily, without blinking. It was Dr. Antoine Neumann, Nobel Prize winner, keynote speaker, a man whose entire career was built on theoretical structures that Malik was now challenging with quiet authority. But Neumann didn't look threatened. He looked stunned. Malik didn't notice him. He was deep inside the rhythm of his own design. His voice fell away as his pen completed the final line of proof. He stepped aside and tapped the board. "This value," he said, pointing to a result, "was recorded in Geneva 2 weeks ago. It wasn't supposed to be possible, but it was, and this is why." The silence was total. Then, from the audience, a single hand rose. Dr. Neumann didn't wait for a mic. "Where did you study?" "Wexley University," Malik said. "Until 3 days ago." "And this?" Neumann asked. "This is your original work?" "Yes," Malik said. "It is." Neumann nodded, then said firmly, "I'd like to speak with you after this panel." Other hands began rising. The room had flipped. Respect began to bloom. Late, reluctant, but real. For the first time in weeks, Malik felt something near justice. Then his phone buzzed. A message, unknown number, "We need to leave." A cease and desist just came through. Someone at Wexley filed it, claiming you stole the formula from a faculty member. If you stay, they'll have security remove you. His breath caught. He didn't show it. He looked up. The room hadn't noticed yet. Eyes were still locked on the board, on him, on the ideas that moments ago weren't allowed to exist in his name. But now, it was happening again. The theft wasn't theoretical anymore. It was live. Then he saw movement. From the back of the room, a figure stood. Tall, gray suit. Wexley faculty ID around his neck. A folded cease and desist notice in hand. He wasn't security. He wasn't press. He was there to silence Malik. Again, and as the figure stepped forward, Malik recognized the man. Not Wendell, but a different professor. The very one he'd once trusted to review his early drafts. Now walking toward the stage with the paper in hand, and his own name printed at the top as the sole author. The footage from the summit spread faster than any calculation Malik had ever written. It wasn't the official conference livestream that broke the story. It was the grainy, slightly shaky video from Dr. Neumann's phone, uploaded without comment to his social media. No caption, no hashtag. Just 21 minutes of a young black man in a hoodie dismantling the boundaries of quantum theory in front of a stunned academic crowd, while a white faculty member from Wexley fumbled on stage with a cease and desist letter that nobody asked for. By morning, the internet had named it the Formula War. The video was everywhere, on science blogs, think piece platforms, TikTok breakdowns, even meme pages reposted it. Though most without understanding a single line of the math. It didn't matter. The story had taken shape. A kid from Detroit, expelled for being too smart, humiliates the Ivy League live on stage. That was the headline that stuck. Malik woke up to hundreds of notifications and a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. His inbox overflowed with requests from journalists, podcasts, science magazines. Invitations poured in from think tanks, Black STEM initiatives, and student groups from campuses he'd never even heard of. One international publication referred to him as America's new prodigy. Another called him the outsider rewriting quantum law. But the most important reaction came quietly, from scientists who mattered. Dr. Neumann's team at MIT requested the full version of Malik's paper. A team from Zurich asked if they could replicate his harmonic framework in their particle simulations. Theoretical physicists in Korea translated his equations to test them on a different axis. In hushed tones, the global community began shifting, not because they understood all of it yet, but because they saw something undeniable in the logic, something disruptive, something dangerous to the people who built their careers defending the status quo. For a moment, Malik thought the narrative had finally turned. But back at Wexley, the war had just begun. The university released a defensive press statement by midday. We remain proud of our commitment to rigorous scholarship and institutional integrity. While we respect Mr. Langston's presentation, we continue to review procedural matters related to his departure. They didn't congratulate him. They didn't correct their lies. They distanced themselves, as if genius was a fire too hot to touch once it burned outside their walls. Meanwhile, conservative media picked up a different angle. Entitled Student Undermines Academic Standards and Storms Scientific Conference Without Authorization, read one headline. Another, Woke Mob Declares Math Racist After School Expels Cheating Student. They aired clips of Malik mid-sentence, stripped of context, alongside furious commentators who called him arrogant, unstable, ungrateful. They showed side-by-side photos of him and Wendell, framing the professor as the victim of a smear campaign. One host shouted into the camera, "This isn't about science. This is about a culture where anyone who fails is allowed to scream racism until they're made into a hero." What they didn't mention was the formula. They never addressed the math, never talked about how Neumann had validated it, never once acknowledged that Malik's proof had just been cited by 2 peer-reviewed physics journals within 48 hours of his summit appearance. At Wexley, chaos unfolded in the faculty halls. Professors panicked, watching their names get dragged into a story they couldn't control. Some began scrubbing old tweets. Others held emergency meetings about narrative damage. Mavis, who had once quietly praised Malik's initial submission, now claimed she'd been misquoted in leaked emails. Wendell refused to appear in public or online, but issued a cryptic statement through his department suggesting that great ideas are rarely the work of a single person, a line designed to steal legitimacy under the guise of collaboration. Students on campus weren't silent. Black student groups held a candlelight march down the main quad with signs reading, "Believe Black Brilliance," and Malik wrote it. But their event was interrupted by a counter-rally, organized by a white student fraternity, claiming academic dishonesty threatens us all. Posters of Malik's face torn in half were taped to classroom doors. Flyers circulated, suggesting he faked everything for attention. It didn't matter how many times the proof had been verified. Truth, Malik realized, could be outnumbered. In the middle of all this, his email pinged with a message flagged urgent. It was from the assistant of a major tech CEO, someone whose name appeared regularly on magazine covers, investor boards, and TED Talk stages. He ran one of the world's most powerful AI labs. The message was brief. "We're extremely interested in the resonance logic of your framework. The CEO would like to meet. Privately." They arranged a video call within hours. The man appeared on screen in a minimalist home office, surrounded by shelves filled with patents and awards. His tone was smooth, polished, controlled, the voice of someone used to making billion-dollar decisions with a smile. "I watched your presentation," he said. "Twice." Malik said nothing. "I think you're building something that goes beyond physics," the CEO continued. "If your model's scalable, it could have implications for quantum computing, energy storage, even AI resonance optimization. The market would respond quickly." Malik felt the shift. The way genius was only respected when it could be monetized. "I'd like to fund your work," the man said. "No strings, no nonsense. You'll have a team, resources, labs. We'll protect your IP." Malik hesitated. "What's the condition?" The man smiled. "You'll need to keep the project under our brand, meaning no independent publishing until we file patents. Also, and I hope you understand, we'd ask you to avoid using your name in public messaging for now." The press frenzy, It's distracting investors. Malik blinked. You want my work, but not my name. It's temporary, the CEO said, still smiling, until things calm down. Malik stared at the screen. He thought of all the times he'd been told he didn't belong. All the professors who needed his math, but not his face. Now a man with power beyond universities was offering the same deal. Visibility without identity, brilliance without ownership. The funding was real. The future could change. He could move past Wexley, past the scandal, past the pain, but it would mean erasing himself again. He didn't respond. He ended the call. He shut the laptop slowly, and just as he sat back, trying to breathe through the fury, his phone vibrated again. This time with a message from an anonymous number. Check the new article. Wexley just claimed your formula was ghostwritten by a senior research fellow. They named him. It's not Wendell. The article stung deeper than anything Malik had endured so far. He expected resistance. He expected spin. But he hadn't expected this. It wasn't Wendell who took credit. It was Dr. Alan Royce, a senior faculty member Malik barely knew. The same Royce who had nodded politely during hallway interactions, who had once lectured about academic humility and the importance of intellectual inheritance. Now the university floated his name as the likely originator of Malik's formula. Not because Royce had anything substantial to back the claim, but because he fit the mold of someone the institution could comfortably reward. In the article, Royce spoke with polished detachment. He said things like, "The structure aligns closely with ideas I've discussed in previous lectures. And while I don't recall formal collaboration with Mr. Langston, inspiration often flows in unseen ways." It was both accusation and erasure. He positioned himself as the architect, and Malik as some accidental intern who might have overheard genius and jotted it down incorrectly. Malik wasn't even given the dignity of being called a thief. He was reduced to a misfiled footnote. The betrayal wasn't just academic, it was existential. Malik sat slouched in a borrowed chair in a downtown co-working space. No longer a student, not yet anything else. The skyline glittered through a dusty window, but none of it reached him. The walls around him were covered in whiteboards, brainstorming charts, and startup slogans that all now felt like cruel jokes. His email was a mix of canceled interviews, cautious postponements, and messages from PR firms offering to help rebrand his image. The same institutions that had praised him days ago were now backing away, afraid of the narrative becoming too complicated, too black, too loud. That's when the CEO's team followed up. The offer was no longer hypothetical. It was official, fully written, and waiting for a signature. Malik would be the lead of a private research and development lab, working on scaling his formula across industries, quantum computing, clean energy, resonance-based data storage. The email was almost poetic in how it described the potential. It used words like pioneer and visionary. But laced between the praise was something colder: control. They flew him out that same night. The building in Manhattan was surgical in its design. Floor-to-ceiling glass, quiet carpets, silence that smelled like wealth. Malik was escorted through a minimalist corridor and brought into a conference room where everything from the temperature to the angle of the chairs seemed calculated to impress. The assistant was polished, her voice neutral. She offered him bottled water that probably cost more than his groceries for a week. 10 minutes later, the CEO entered. This time in person. No screen, no buffer. He wore casual power designer sneakers, a slim hoodie, and a watch whose face gleamed like an unspoken promise. He didn't shake Malik's hand. He simply sat across from him, folded his hands neatly, and slid a thick folder across the table. No dramatic build-up. Just business. "I've been following everything," the CEO said. "Your formula, your summit moment, even the Royce spin. You've made more noise than most Nobel winners do in a decade." Malik didn't respond. He opened the folder slowly. The top sheet read, "Intellectual Partnership and Research Privacy Agreement." The CEO leaned back. "We want you to lead your own lab. Full funding, full staff. Anything you need. You'll be able to take your work further than Wexley ever allowed." Malik scanned the next page, then the next. It was all clean, legal, elegant, until he reached the clause on disclosure. A non-disclosure agreement, so sweeping, it covered not only technical data, but personal experience. He wouldn't just be forbidden from discussing future research. He wouldn't be allowed to speak in any format about what happened at Wexley, about the manipulation, the racism, the attempted erasure. He would in effect erase himself. Malik looked up. You want to own my silence. The CEO gave a small smile. I want to free you from the noise. And the attribution? Malik asked. My name? The CEO didn't blink. We'd use a branded authorship model. It's cleaner. We can build you up internally. Let your ideas shine, without dragging in the controversy. Controversy. That's what they called injustice now. Malik closed the folder slowly, then tapped the front of it with his finger. What happens if I say no? The smile thinned. You'll find that the scientific world has a very short memory. Today's genius is tomorrow's liability. But this gives you legacy. He didn't say it aloud, but the meaning hung in the air. Take the money, Malik. Take the lab. Take the power. But give up your right to tell your story. Malik thought of every locked door, every room he wasn't supposed to be in, every lecture where professors looked through him, instead of at him. He thought of his mother working double shifts, of his baby cousin who thought Malik was already famous. He thought of all the black kids watching, all the ones who didn't have the math to defend themselves, who only had their names. I'm not trading truth for convenience, Malik said, his voice calm but final. Not now. Not ever. The CEO gave a sigh that sounded almost bored. He collected the folder, stood, and offered a last line with surgical politeness. Then I hope you have very good legal counsel. The assistant walked Malik out. There was no handshake, no thank you, no invitation to reconsider. Just a silent corridor behind him, and a war ahead. Outside, the cold hit different, sharper, more honest. Malik walked through the city with no destination, just motion. He had nothing left but the formula, and his name. The two things they kept trying to separate. He thought for a moment that maybe this was freedom, to be unclaimed, unpolished and unowned. Then came the email. He opened it on a park bench, the wind biting at his knuckles. Subject: Langston via Wendell. Defamation lawsuit notification. Attached 15 pages of legal fire. Filed officially in Boston by Professor Howard Wendell. Accusing Malik of malicious defamation, career sabotage and intellectual misappropriation of academic structures. Wendell claimed the leaked audio had been doctored. He argued that Malik's public narrative had cost him tenure, ruined his book deal, and created a hostile work environment. Wendell was suing for $5,000 in damages. The number barely registered. Malik scanned the final page of the filing, expecting more legal jargon, but what he found made his breath freeze. Attached was a witness statement, signed, under oath. From Jordan Keene, the same labmate who had once defended him, the one who found the recorder, the one who had said, "That makes sense, given everything." Now testifying that Malik had orchestrated a deliberate smear campaign, that Malik had edited audio files to destroy faculty credibility and weaponized racial bias for personal gain. And beneath Jordan's signature, the statement ended with one final line. I was present when Malik said, "They'll never believe a black kid did this on his own, so I'm going to make them believe it anyway." The courtroom felt less like a place of justice and more like a theater built for spectacle. Everything about it was too controlled. The polished wood panels, the way the light glinted off glass, the uncomfortable silence that settled over the room like smoke. It was media lined the back wall, cameras poised like loaded weapons. Reporters scribbled in notepads, as if writing the first chapter of a national scandal. Every seat was filled. Every eye was waiting. Malik sat at the defendant's table, suit pressed but hands tight in his lap, heart thudding beneath layers of silence. This wasn't a student hearing anymore. This was federal court, and across the aisle, wearing the posture of a man both wronged and revered, sat Professor Howard Wendell. His gray suit matched his expression, cold, calculated, ready for war. He didn't look at Malik once. He didn't have to. His legal team, 3 high-powered attorneys and a media consultant, carried enough weight to do his speaking for him. And worse, they weren't alone. Wexley University had filed an official brief in support of Wendell, aligning itself publicly with the very man who had erased Malik's name and co-opted his brilliance. The narrative Wendell's lawyers built was brutal. They framed Malik as a cunning opportunist, a student who weaponized social media and racial discourse to disguise academic fraud. In opening statements, they projected headlines, clipped videos, and screenshots of Malik's posts, all carefully selected to craft a version of him that felt threatening, arrogant, and unstable. They highlighted phrases like colonized science and gatekeeping academia, painting them as radical dog whistles instead of lived experience. Then they played spliced audio from the leaked recordings, stripped of context, surgically edited. In this version of the story, Wendell sounded careful, even thoughtful. Malik sounded bitter, ungrateful, and dangerous. Then came their star witness, Jordan Keene. He walked to the stand wearing remorse like a badge, eyes low, voice trembling just enough to seem honest. He spoke of tension in the lab. He said Malik constantly talked about being underestimated, and that he bragged about using race as a shield. He testified that Malik once said, "They'll never believe a black kid did this on his own, so I'm going to make them believe it anyway." Gasps moved through the room. Cameras clicked like gunfire. Wendell's lawyers leaned back, satisfied. They didn't need to prove Malik was guilty. They just needed to plant enough doubt that he could be. Malik felt like the floor beneath him was cracking, but Patrice McCall didn't blink. She sat beside him, arms crossed, her face unreadable. When it was her turn, she rose from her seat like a storm gathering speed. She didn't defend Malik first. She dismantled the premise. She started by showing the court what systemic erasure looks like, not through passion but data. She walked the jury through decades of suppressed contributions by black scholars. From undercredited inventions to completely stolen theories. She cited peer-reviewed research. She projected cases of retracted black-authored work later published under white names. She didn't raise her voice once, because the facts did all the screaming. Then she turned to the recordings. She played them, the full, unedited tapes Malik had captured. They were long, quiet, and devastating. Professors laughed about who would inherit Malik's work if it gained traction. Wendell was heard suggesting it be redirected to a more reputationally sound figure. They mocked his speech patterns, called him ambitious in a dangerous way, joked that genius with a hoodie wouldn't sell to donors. The jury was silent, faces stiff. One woman near the front removed her glasses, as if needing to re-see everything. And then, without warning, Patrice made her move. She walked to the judge's bench and requested to admit new evidence. A sealed digital archive. On that drive were internal university emails, never intended for public view, obtained through a confidential whistleblower. The emails traced a calculated campaign to strip Malik of authorship. Faculty referred to Malik as a liability, and Royce as a preferable public face. They discussed managing the optics, keeping Malik on the sidelines, while preparing an alternate paper under a faculty name in case the research exploded. Then came the email that detonated everything. From Wendell, dated just 4 days before the lawsuit filing. "If we don't bury him legally, we lose the narrative. The university can't afford that. Neither can I." The courtroom gasped again. Wendell's attorneys objected instantly, arguing that the emails were confidential, illegally obtained, inadmissible. They said it was a privacy violation, a breach of academic sovereignty. The judge paused the trial, ordered a recess, and asked for a private review. The jury was escorted out. The media lost their minds. Reporters rushed to their phones. Headlines were being rewritten in real time. Patrice leaned in, whispering to Malik, "If they let this in, his entire case burns." But before the judge could rule, a bailiff entered the courtroom carrying a sealed manila envelope. The judge opened it, his eyes scanning quickly. He looked up confused, then cleared his throat. "This court has just received a confidential submission from Wexley University's legal department, marked urgent settlement consideration." Gasps swept the room again, because whatever was inside that envelope wasn't just an olive branch. It was the university trying to shut everything down, before the truth burned all of them to the ground. And as Malik watched the judge read silently, Patrice's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, then froze. A new anonymous message had just arrived. "You haven't seen all the emails. They buried the worst ones. Check folder Echo 3. It's not just Wendell. It goes higher." Patrice didn't speak as the judge finished reading the settlement proposal from Wexley. Her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. Same untraceable number. 2 lines only. Echo 3 is in the mirror folder. Buried in system archives. Search by timestamp, not subject line. She tapped a few times, eyes narrowing. Within moments, a new file tree unfolded on her screen. One that hadn't shown up in the university's official legal disclosure. Hidden emails. Dozens of them. And not just about Malik. It started with a name she didn't recognize. Then another. Then another. All black. All marked as watchlist and subject lines buried under academic jargon. A sick pattern revealed itself. For over 2 decades, members of Wexley's elite physics department, including Wendell, had quietly reassigned, buried, or delayed publication on research produced by high-performing black students. In some cases, the students had dropped out. In others, they'd transferred after being accused of plagiarism or improper sourcing. But each case followed the same rhythm. discovery, denial, containment, and erasure. Patrice's heart pounded as she clicked through email after email. There were threads between Wendell and Royce discussing timing optics and grooming publication alternatives. Another message between Wendell and the former Dean of Sciences simply said, "This one's promising but not scalable in our environment. Redirect credit before tenure review." Malik leaned over, reading with her in real time. His throat tightened. These weren't just emails, they were blueprints for institutional theft, and he wasn't the first victim. He was the latest in a lineage of unspoken casualties. Patrice requested an emergency review with the judge, off the record. She submitted the ECO3 archive as sealed evidence, arguing it went beyond defamation and into systemic discrimination. The courtroom was cleared temporarily, reporters forced out, jury sent home. It became a closed-door session. When the judge returned to the bench, his demeanor had shifted, not softened, hardened. A man now aware that he wasn't just presiding over a lawsuit, but standing at the edge of an institutional implosion. Patrice made her motion clear. "This isn't about Wendell anymore," she said. "This is about a 20-year pattern of buried credit, racial redirection, and university-sanctioned erasure. If we do not address it now, this court becomes complicit." The judge didn't answer immediately, but he allowed one witness. Patrice called to the stand, someone the court had never heard of before. A former Wexley physics student, class of 2012, who now worked as a data analyst in Baltimore. Her name was Alana Pierce. Her voice shook as she swore the oath. Alana's eyes darted across the courtroom. She didn't look at Wendell. She didn't need to. Her pain was pointed. She explained how she had written a paper as an undergrad, a paper on particle spin entropy and vacuum resonance, and submitted it for faculty review. Weeks later, it was dismissed for being theoretical fluff. She received a plagiarism warning. No formal punishment, just a black mark. It shattered her confidence. 3 years later, while applying to graduate school, she stumbled upon a published version of her formula, slightly modified, co-authored by a then doctoral student who'd had access to her draft through a faculty mentor. That doctoral student was white. That mentor, Wendell. Alana never came forward. Until now. Gasps echoed in the courtroom as she told her story, how she tried to report it, how her emails went unanswered, how she eventually left physics entirely. Her final words cut like steel. "I thought it was just me, that I wasn't good enough. But when I saw Malik, I knew it was never about talent. It was about erasure." Malik's jaw tightened. He didn't blink. Patrice then submitted a compiled report of 12 other students, each with similar patterns. Some had dropped out. Some had transferred. One was institutionalized after a mental health breakdown, following an accusation of aggressive self-promotion. Each student's story echoed the same tactic: silence the work, isolate the student, repackage the research. Wendell's legal team erupted. They called it speculative, unrelated, prejudicial. But the weight of the evidence was undeniable. The courtroom no longer saw Wendell as a man defending his name. They saw him as the architect of a machine designed to reward whiteness, punish deviation, and sterilize black brilliance. The gallery was stunned. The judge took a long pause. He tapped his pen against the desk slowly, eyes scanning his notes, the archive list, the now widening implications. He didn't ask any further questions. He didn't request closing arguments. Instead, he cleared his throat and made a single chilling statement. "This court will delay a ruling. Effective immediately, we request an independent academic inquiry into the claims submitted today. Because if what I've just seen is accurate, this could disrupt the reputation of the institution far beyond this courtroom." A murmur broke out. Wendell didn't move. Neither did Patrice. But Malik sat still, breathing through a silence he hadn't felt since the moment his notebook was first slammed shut in that lecture hall. This was no longer just about a lawsuit. This was about ghosts coming back to reclaim their names. And as the room prepared to recess, the judge was handed another note, this time from the Office of the Attorney General, marked Urgent Federal Inquiry, Civil Rights Division. Malik's case had just become a national investigation. The federal inquiry detonated online, like a spark in dry brush. What had once been a courtroom scandal was now a global reckoning. Within hours of the Civil Rights Division announcing their investigation into Wexley University's alleged erasure of black student work, social media platforms became battlegrounds. It was no longer just about Malik. His name had become a symbol of stolen credit, institutional racism, and the fragility of truth in systems built to silence it. Twitter became a war zone. Hashtags exploded. In credit Malik, Wexley erased me. Black brilliance stolen. Each one drawing thousands of retweets within hours. Prominent scholars posted open letters condemning Wexley's silence. Alumni of elite institutions began sharing their own stories, not all as dramatic as Malik's, but each echoing the same theme. I was erased before I was ever seen. TikTok creators broke down Malik's formula with overlays of him presenting at the summit, calling it the equation that shook an empire. YouTube essayists launched hour-long explainers. Reddit threads dissected court testimony like it was evidence in a federal conspiracy. But where there was light, the shadows followed fast. Smear campaigns emerged almost overnight. Bots with freshly created accounts began spreading edited clips and out-of-context quotes from Malik's court appearance. Headlines were twisted. Posts suggested Malik had inflated his role, or engineered a racial panic for fame. Hashtags like Malik hoax and fabricated genius trended for brief bursts, boosted by suspicious engagement spikes that reeked of paid amplification. Anonymous blogs published entire investigative reports, questioning Malik's credentials, most of them using AI-generated nonsense or citations that didn't exist. Malik saw it all. He tried to look away. He failed. What began as vindication turned into a digital flood of noise that choked the very oxygen he was breathing. Every platform was a mirror, distorting his face in real time. On Monday he was a hero. By Thursday he was a threat. On Friday he was a joke. Then back to hero again. He couldn't keep up. Neither could the people around him. His family was the first to suffer. His mother received an unmarked envelope with photos of Malik leaving the courthouse. No threats, no words, just surveillance. His younger cousin was pulled out of school when a concerned parent emailed screenshots of Malik's protest speech to the administration. His aunt, a nurse, was stopped by a patient's family member who asked if she was related to that race-baiting fraud from Wexley. The vitriol didn't stop at whispers.
There were voicemails now.
Emails. Social media messages containing threats both vague and visceral. Some said, "We know where you live." Others were more sinister, mixing racial slurs with thinly veiled language, like "people like you always overreach." Patrice had security protocols in place. Malik was briefed on how to move, who to avoid, what to monitor, but no amount of caution could prepare him for the psychological warfare, because the true damage wasn't physical. It was emotional, psychological, spiritual, the kind that corrodes from the inside. He stopped sleeping. Nights were now spent lying in darkness, his phone screen glowing inches from his face, scrolling endlessly through waves of support, followed by oceans of hate. He found himself watching old clips of his presentation at the summit, not out of pride but to remind himself that it had happened, that he was there, that it was real. He stopped writing, stopped solving, stopped showing up to team meetings unless Patrice forced him. His mind, once the sharpest blade in the room, had dulled under the weight of constant scrutiny. He began second-guessing his own memory, his own narrative. He heard his internal voice shifting, asking whether he'd come on too strong, whether he'd overreacted, whether maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as unfair as he thought. That was the darkest moment. Not when the trolls flooded his page, not when his mother cried for the first time on the phone, not even when the lawsuit resumed. It was when he began to doubt his own story. Then one night, as the clock blinked 3:21 a.m., and he sat alone in a hoodie at his kitchen table, his laptop buzzed with a new email. No sender, no subject line, just a video file, and a single sentence in the body. "You don't know what they're hiding." He hesitated, then clicked. The video was surveillance footage. Grainy, time-stamped, clearly from an internal university hallway. One he recognized instantly. It was the corridor outside the physics department's secured faculty research room. Dated months before the trial. Two figures entered frame. Wendell and Royce. No hesitation. No awareness they were being watched. Their conversation, though muffled, was clear enough. "You sure the kid's not recording again?" Wendell asked. Royce chuckled. "Doesn't matter. We'll scrub the tapes. We've done it before." Wendell. "He's good. Too good. This formula, it's better than what we have." Royce. "Then we own it. That's what tenure is for." A pause. Then Wendell again. "If this goes wrong, I hope he folds." That kind of mind, with rage. That's a career destroyer. Royce's final line chilled the air. "We're not just burying a student, we're protecting the institution." The video cut to black. Malik didn't breathe for several seconds. The footage wasn't just confirmation, it was premeditation. conspiracy, and it wasn't supposed to exist, because the university had claimed all surveillance from that wing was routinely deleted within 30 days. He forwarded it immediately to Patrice. His hands shook as he typed. Then, just as he hit send, another email landed in his inbox. Same formatting. Same ghost sender. This time, a single line of text. There's more. And not just at Wexley. This goes across 4 universities. Malik opened the attachment. It was a list of names, dates, and file codes, tied to internal investigations at other Ivy League institutions. At the top, one bolded line read, "Black research candidates flagged for publication suppression." The moment Malik opened the second email, his breath caught in his throat. The attachment was small, just a few kilobytes, but the weight behind it felt like it could collapse everything. Inside was a plain text file, no logos, no metadata, just a title, "Black research candidates flagged for publication suppression. Internal tracking index, confidential." Beneath it was a table, 4 universities, dozens of names, columns labeled risk level, mentorship notes, redirection status, and containment action. Malik stared, jaw clenched. His name was there, in bold. Next to it, high visibility, strong media potential, prioritize narrative control. The notes were dated weeks before the leaked audio scandal, well before the lawsuit. This wasn't reactive. It was procedural, deliberate, and he wasn't alone. There were other names. Some he recognized, graduate students who had disappeared from programs suddenly. One had gone viral years ago, for presenting a new AI compression model, before she mysteriously lost her grant. Another had allegedly fabricated results, but no proof was ever released. Malik felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't a case. It was a playbook. He called Patrice immediately. Her voice, calm as always, dropped a full octave when she read the file. "We leak this," she said, "and we blow the whole damn system up. But we also put you in the line of fire again. And this time, they'll come after you harder. Legally, personally. You sure you're ready for that?" Malik didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was spinning too fast. Later that night, he received another anonymous message. No text, no greeting. Just a video file named Final Protocol Confirm. He clicked play. The camera was fixed in a tight corner angle. The timestamp placed it 4 months earlier, during the heat of midterms, well before any media coverage. 5 men sat around a polished table. Wendell, Royce, 2 assistant deans, and a legal consultant. The door was shut. The audio was crisp. "Royce, he's gaining attention. We need to clip that momentum. Wendell, I say we start leaking concerns about his sources. Raise academic integrity flags. He recorded us, right? That's illegal." Assistant Dean. "He's from Detroit. That story alone builds sympathy. If we're too aggressive, we martyr him." Legal consultant. "Then discredit. Question the math. Float plagiarism. Remind people he's under review. Let media do the rest." Then came the moment that froze Malik's soul. Wendell leaned back, grinning. "Let's be real. If Malik Langston were white, he'd already be holding a damn patent. But he's not. He's a PR disaster with a hoodie and a mouth. We bury this now, or we get buried later." Laughter followed. Royce chimed in. "One good meltdown, and he'll be back in Detroit, doing equations on napkins." The final line came from the assistant dean. "Then let's give him that meltdown." The tape ended. Malik sat back in his chair, fists trembling. He knew rage. He knew silence. But this was surgical racism. Planned, polished, hidden behind doors with soundproof insulation and Ivy League credibility. He called Patrice again. She was silent for a long time. "If we release this, they'll charge you under federal wiretapping laws." This wasn't public space. New York statutes strict. Unauthorized recordings of private meetings. That's jail time. Malik ran both hands through his hair. "Even if I'm the victim, the law doesn't care. Not about you. Not when institutions this big are involved." He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Malik woke to another message from the same anonymous source. It was just a quote. "Sometimes the law protects power, not truth. You decide which one you serve." He stared at the screen for almost an hour. Then, with slow, deliberate fingers, he opened a private browser, uploaded the video to a cloud drive under a random file name, encrypted it, and emailed it to 3 journalists at major outlets, none of whom knew him directly. No signature, no message, just the truth. It was out of his hands now. By the afternoon, the world had seen it. The video hit the front page of every major news outlet: CNN, the New York Times, BBC, ProPublica, all within the same hour. But just as Malik stepped outside to catch a breath of air, his phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't anonymous. It was a warning from Patrice. The DOJ is coming. You need to be ready. The video didn't just break the internet. It cracked open the illusion of invincibility that had cloaked Wexley University for over a century. From the moment it aired, the school's ivory tower began to tilt, exposing not just one scandal, but a rot that ran deeper than anyone had imagined. The footage was undeniable: a closed-door meeting, 5 powerful men, and a plan not just to discredit a student, but to surgically dismantle his future because of the color of his skin. The backlash was immediate, fierce, and relentless. CNN led with it that evening. So did MSNBC. Even networks that had previously painted Malik as controversial were forced to recant. The New York Times printed a front-page story titled, "Erased Genius," the leaked tape that rocked Ivy League credibility. Within hours, Wexley's administration was in full crisis mode. But their statements came too late. Damage, once viral, spreads faster than apology. Protests flared up again. Only this time they weren't just students with signs. Faculty members began to walk out. Prominent donors released carefully worded statements, distancing themselves from the institution. A Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company withdrew its $18 million grant. 2 deans resigned by the end of the day. Within 72 hours, 3 more followed. Royce vanished from campus completely. Wendell was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. A phrase that to the public sounded like a death sentence disguised in HR language. For the first time in its history, Wexley was no longer in control of its narrative. But even as the tower collapsed around him, Malik stood frozen in a strange purgatory. He had exposed the truth. He had survived character assassination. He had become a symbol around the globe. Yet still, no justice had arrived. No official clearing of his name. No reinstatement of his degree. No formal apology. Not even a direct statement from the university acknowledging the truth of the tape. It was as if they had decided, if they just stayed quiet long enough, people would move on. But people didn't move on. Social media was ablaze. Malik was right trended for 6 straight days. Celebrities, scientists, athletes, even foreign diplomats posted about him. Invitations poured in from think tanks, global universities, TED Talk organizers, but none of that erased the silence from the one place that mattered most. Wexley itself, the school that once celebrated him as a diversity breakthrough, had now locked its gates, refusing to even say his name aloud. Malik's name became gospel everywhere, except where he earned it. He stopped checking his email. It was too much. Too many strangers projecting love, anger, fear, hope. Too many conspiracies. Too many expectations. One day, he found a 10-page open letter from a high school student in Ghana who'd memorized his entire summit speech and wanted to solve like Malik. The next day, he got a death threat written in caps lock and Bible verses. The contrast was suffocating. He no longer knew how to walk outside. When he did, people either stared in awe or crossed the street. To some, he was a living legend. To others, a threat to the institution they'd built their identities around. And still, no degree. No apology, no closure. Even Patrice, always a source of poise and strategy, was beginning to wear thin. The Department of Justice had expanded the investigation, launching probes into 3 other elite universities linked to the suppression list. But legal systems moved slowly. Malik's case was no longer a case. It was a symbol, and symbols, she reminded him, often got treated like myths instead of men. Malik felt himself fading inside the noise. He missed silence, the good kind. The silence of numbers unfolding, of long formulas scribbled at 3 a.m., of rooms that respected thinking over shouting. Now every sound was pressure. Every knock at the door, every ping from his phone, every breath he took in public felt politicized. He had taken on a giant and survived, but no one warned him how lonely it would feel on the other side of survival. Then, just after dawn on a Monday morning, he heard a soft knock at his front door. He wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, he peeked through the peephole. No one was there. But on the floor lay a thick envelope. No postage, no name, no markings except for a gold emblem pressed into navy blue. Malik picked it up, heart hammering. The weight of it felt ceremonial. He looked closer. The emblem was unmistakable. The Great Seal of the United States. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was a single page, centered and minimal. No flourish, no signature, just words. You are cordially invited to attend a private roundtable at the White House on education, equity and innovation, hosted by the President of the United States. No RSVP link, no instructions, just a date, time and location. Malik stared at the letter, heart racing. This couldn't be real, and yet, it was. The typography, the watermark, the embossed seal, all confirmed its authenticity. He sat down slowly, the paper still in hand. What did they want from him? An endorsement? A speech? A photo opportunity? Or something more? The irony burned inside him. He'd been erased by the very institution that claimed to represent excellence, and now he was being summoned by the highest office in the country. He wasn't sure how to feel. He hadn't even processed it when his laptop dinged again. A new email had arrived. No subject, no sender. Just 4 chilling words. You're not safe there. Malik stared at the screen, the White House letter still in his hand, the weight of both messages crashing into each other like tectonic plates. For the first time in weeks, he felt something unfamiliar crawling up his spine. Fear, not from being silenced, but from being seen. Too much. By too many. And now, by the wrong people. The envelope hadn't lied, but it hadn't told the whole truth either. Malik boarded the early morning flight to Washington, D.C., carrying nothing but a slim garment bag, and a mind weighed down by history. The White House invitation sat folded in his inner jacket pocket, creased now from being unfolded too many times, reread not for its words but for its implications. He remembered the warning email again, "You're not safe there," and wondered if safety had ever truly been part of this journey. What he was walking into wasn't danger in the traditional sense. It was exposure at the highest possible level. The summit was held at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. An intentional choice that no one missed. Flags lined the entrance. Secret Service agents moved with quiet precision. Malik passed through security without incident. But he felt the eyes on him, not suspicious, but curious. Respectful. Almost reverent. This was new territory. He had been debated, dissected, demonized. But here in this space, his presence carried weight that didn't need defending. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with ceremony. Scientists, educators, policy leaders, and journalists filled the hall. Screens behind the stage rotated through images of innovation, classrooms, laboratories, young students scribbling equations on whiteboards. Malik took his seat near the front, flanked by 2 Nobel laureates who nodded at him like equals. That alone nearly broke him. Months ago, he had been expelled without a hearing. Now he was being positioned as a national example. When the president entered, the room rose in unison. Applause rolled like thunder, but Malik barely heard it. His focus narrowed to the words that followed. The president spoke about talent being America's greatest renewable resource, about how too often, brilliance was lost, not because it lacked merit, but because it lacked protection. Then, without ceremony, he said Malik's name. Clearly, deliberate, Malik Langston represents the kind of American genius we almost lost to silence, the president said. Not because he failed, but because the system did. A murmur rippled through the audience. Cameras zoomed in. Malik felt his chest tighten, not with pride, but with gravity. This wasn't praise, it was indictment. The president continued, citing Malik's work without simplifying it, acknowledging the global impact his framework had already begun to make. He spoke of the cost of institutional arrogance and the danger of confusing tradition with truth. Then he invited Malik to the stage. The applause this time wasn't polite. It was sustained. Standing. Unavoidable. Malik walked slowly, every step measured. He wasn't thinking about the crowd. He was thinking about the lecture hall where this began. The notebook slammed shut. The laughter, the quiet rage, all of it converged as he reached the podium. He didn't smile. He didn't thank anyone. He began by saying that he did not accept honors easily. That recognition, when delayed until it was politically safe, felt hollow without accountability. The room leaned in. This wasn't the speech they expected. He spoke about education as a gatekeeping machine disguised as opportunity. About how brilliance from marginalized bodies was treated as raw material, not authorship. He talked about being told he didn't belong, not because his ideas were wrong, but because his existence complicated the narrative of who genius was allowed to be. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. When institutions ask for forgiveness without change, Malik said, They are asking us to forget, and forgetting is the most efficient form of erasure. The silence was complete. He refused to name Wexley, refused to name Wendell, but everyone understood. Malik wasn't there to settle a score. He was there to draw a line. He demanded reform, transparent authorship protections, independent review boards for academic misconduct, and federal oversight for discrimination in research institutions that received public funding. He said honor meant nothing without repair, that progress without justice was just branding. By the time he stepped back from the podium, the applause was hesitant at first, then overwhelming. Some stood, others remained seated, stunned. The president didn't clap immediately. He nodded once, slowly, the way leaders do when they know a moment has shifted beyond them. Backstage, Malik felt the adrenaline drain from his body. Patrice was there, eyes bright but serious. She didn't congratulate him. She just said he had changed the conversation. Malik nodded, though he wasn't sure what that meant for his life beyond this room. As he exited the building, the press surged forward, shouting questions. Malik didn't answer. He moved through the crowd escorted by staff, the echo of his own words still ringing in his ears. For the first time he understood that being seen at this level didn't mean being safe. It meant being permanent. Just outside the exit corridor, his phone vibrated. One message. Unknown number. 6 words. He wants to speak with you. Malik stopped walking. A second message followed before he could respond. Howard Wendell is here. His breath caught. The professor who started it all. The man who had laughed while slamming shut his notebook. The man whose voice had been caught plotting his erasure. The man whose career now hung by threads he himself had woven. Malik stared at the screen, heart pounding. Around him aides moved, cameras flashed, history shifted. And somewhere in the building behind him, the past was waiting. Malik turned slowly back toward the hallway, knowing that the final confrontation wasn't about revenge. It was about whether the system that tried to erase him would ever be forced to listen. The room was smaller than Malik expected, not the kind of grand office or auditorium where confrontations like this usually played out in stories. It was a tucked-away chamber in the lower level of the museum, windowless, thick walls, a small conference table in the center. The kind of room where things were said off-record, where history sometimes whispered instead of shouted. Malik stepped inside slowly. The air was cold and still. Across the table sat Professor Howard Wendell. He looked older now. Smaller, somehow. Not in stature. He still carried himself with the same spine-stiff arrogance, but in presence. The press conferences, the resignations, the public disgrace had shaved away the layers of academic armor. His once neatly parted hair was grayer, his eyes, bloodshot, but his expression hadn't changed. No remorse, no fear, just calculation, the same kind that used to hover behind every snide comment, every smirk when Malik raised his hand in class. There were no introductions, no guards, just 2 men, one once dismissed as nothing, the other once worshipped as everything, now forced to meet on equal ground. I didn't request this, Malik said flatly. I know, Wendell replied. His voice was calm, measured. I asked to see you. I wasn't sure if you'd come. I almost didn't. Wendell nodded. But you did. Silence. Malik folded his arms. So what now? You want to apologize? Clear your conscience before the next lawsuit hits. Wendell leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose like a tired professor after office hours. No, he said. I didn't call you here for that. Malik tilted his head. Of course not. Wendell's gaze sharpened. I called you here because I needed to say something that I couldn't say in court, or to the media, or in a statement written by attorneys. Malik didn't speak. Wendell continued. I was wrong about your formula. Entirely. I've reviewed it again, independently. It's revolutionary. The implications are enormous. Quantum interpretation, multi-body symmetry. You've shifted the axis of the entire field. Malik said nothing. He wasn't going to thank him for stating the obvious. But Wendell added, pausing, I'm not here to apologize. Because I don't regret what I tried to do. The room dropped into a dead hush. Wendell's tone stayed even, chilling in its composure. You don't understand what it costs people like me when people like you win. Malik blinked, not because he was surprised, but because Wendell had finally said it aloud. All of this, Wendell gestured vaguely, is built on quiet hierarchies, on trust, on control. You threatened that, not by being wrong, but by being undeniable. He leaned forward, eyes glinting. You didn't just solve an equation. You broke the order. You weren't supposed to win. You weren't even supposed to be noticed. Malik stepped closer to the table. So all of this, he said, voice low, was never about science. Wendell nodded slowly. Science is neutral, but institutions are not. You think I hate you because you're black. That's too simple. I feared you because you didn't wait for permission. Malik stared at him, not with hatred, but with an eerie clarity. And you think I needed it? Wendell's expression tightened. You have no idea how the world really works. No, Malik said. You have no idea how it could. The silence between them stretched. It wasn't hostility anymore. It was the exposed wiring of a system that had finally short-circuited. There were no winners here, only revelation. You lost everything, Malik said quietly. I lost the illusion of control, Wendell replied. There's a difference. Malik studied him for a long moment. Then he turned to leave. You know, Wendell added behind him, no matter how high you go, they'll never stop trying to cut you down. Every room you walk into will measure you against a myth of their own making. You'll always be tolerated. Malik paused at the door, hand on the frame. I'm not interested in being tolerated, he said. I'm building rooms where people like me don't need to shrink to fit. Then he walked out. He didn't look back. Outside, the air had shifted. The sky over DC had dimmed into a gold-streaked dusk. Reporters still lingered. A few recognized him, tried to rush forward, but aides blocked the path. Malik moved silently past the crowd, past the flash of cameras, past the noise. He didn't stop until he was alone again. In the car, headed toward Dulles. He had a flight to catch. His next destination was Geneva, not for rest, but for something far bigger than any headline. The United Nations Science Assembly was hosting its annual Global Innovation Summit, and Malik Langston wasn't just attending. He was headlining. But this time, his formula wasn't about proving his worth. It was about predicting the future. His new research, still unpublished, still encrypted, explored a theory that blurred the boundary between probability and reality. It was technical, yes, but its consequences weren't. If proven, it could rewrite parts of computational physics, challenge the foundations of AI modeling, and according to Patrice's private research analyst, reveal mathematical patterns that might upend the economics of predictive warfare. He hadn't shared it with anyone yet, not even her, because some truths don't just demand to be seen, they demand to be protected. As Malik boarded the plane, his phone vibrated with a secure notification. Foreign surveillance flagged your theory. 2 nations are now tracking you. He looked out the window, the sky stretching into black, knowing his fight wasn't over. It was just moving to a global stage. If you believe stories like Malik's should never be silenced, type yes in the comments. What would you have done if your future was buried just to protect someone else's power? Don't forget to subscribe, because these aren't just stories. They're reminders of what still needs to change. Together, we honor truth and demand a world that listens.